Good evening. Your life is not yours anymore because things are going according to plan.
We're not going to get anywhere close to trying to prevent another lab leak of this dangerous sort of experiment. You won't admit that it's dangerous, and for that lack of judgment, I think it's time that you resign.
Well, this isn't good for us.
Project Veritas has obtained never-before-seen military documents regarding the origins of COVID-19, gain-of-function research, vaccines, potential treatments which have been suppressed, and the government's effort to conceal all of this.
Our house of cards is crumbling.
If the Department of Defense, the same people who make our nuclear arsenal, felt this research was too dangerous to proceed with, why in the world did the NIH, NIAID, and EcoHealth Alliance recklessly disregard the risks involved?
Do you think with the narrative unraveling, if I cooperate, I'd be able to stay out of jail? You know, because I've just been following orders? That's more like it. Hey there, friends! Our new top story tonight, the narrative is crumbling. Yikes. I mean, finally, the masses are finally seeing through the propaganda of the narrative to the truth. How is the narrative crumbling? Why is it crumbling? And what does this mean? We'll answer all these questions on tonight's special report. Oh shit, the narrative is crumbling. Ha ha ha. And I hope you know, I've been on your side all this time. You know that, right? Can you call my lawyer and ask him to meet me here after the show? Well, just how many people are waking up? In a recent poll I ran on yours truly's YouTube channel, I asked this question. What do you think the lockdowns are about? A, keeping people safe, or B, tyrannical control and power. With over 100,000 people voting, a whopping 4% answered they believe the lockdowns are about keeping people safe. That option was barely edged out by the 96% who have woken up and believe the lockdowns and mandates are about tyrannical control and power. And now with the narrative seemingly getting weaker by the day, it appears as though our continued attempts to deceive you are the exact things waking you up the most. This just in! People are intelligent enough that you can't fool them forever. In addition to the Project Veritas bombshell story this week about Fauci and friends, what else is happening that tells us the narrative is getting as limp as a Viagra-free Klaus Schwab? Where do we begin? Let's start with backpedaling.
Is that if you look at the children who are hospitalized, many of them are hospitalized with COVID as opposed to because of COVID.
Quite a shift in perspective. Everybody else has known this all along, but the world's top scientist has either just figured this out after 2 years, or he's simply changed his narrative because he's realized people aren't dumb enough to fall for his deception anymore. Which is true, you be the judge, and his crimes against humanity aren't so bad. Let's move on. I love this guy. CDC Director Rochelle Walensky evades a question about people dying with the virus versus deaths from the virus. And she evades it with the grace of Alec Baldwin playing with a gun on set.
Do you know how many of the 836,000 deaths in the U.S. linked to COVID are from COVID, or how many are with COVID but they had other comorbidities? Do you have that breakdown?
Yes, of course. With Omicron, we're following that very carefully. Our death registry, of course, takes a few weeks to collect. And of course, Omicron has just been with us for a few weeks, but those data will be forthcoming.
Super forthcoming, Rochelle. She's bright enough to figure out how to not know the answer to almost any question she doesn't want to answer. On the brighter side, Walensky has become a leader in the women's equality movement, inspiring women everywhere to know they can be just as much of a lying, tyrannical scumbag as a man can. Oh, and there she is too. Moving along. The top science fiction author in the country right now, the CDC, has been instrumental in writing so much of the now failing narrative. Accordingly, the CDC has changed their super scientific recommendations when someone tests positive for how long they need to be isolated for / psychologically damaged for, changing their command from 10 days to 5 days. Hashtag lack of social connection is the first step in mass formation psychosis. Now watch this boring clip of CDC Director Rochelle Walensky.
Consideration in not requiring a negative test after these 5 days because there aren't enough tests to go around in this country?
You know, we make these recommendations in the context of science, in the context of ongoing epidemiology, and in the context of what is feasible in collaboration with our public health and local and state public health partners. And through that discussion and through the discussions within CDC with our own subject matter experts and with the FDA, we made the recommendation, you know, these tests are actually not authorized for the purpose of evaluating contagiousness.
She said 5 times in that short answer, which typically means someone's having to think really hard about what to say and not say. But when someone is speaking what's called truth, it's much easier because there's simply nothing to hide and therefore nothing to filter out with the net. Oh, and also, what was that last thing she said?
You know, these tests are actually not authorized for the purpose of evaluating contagiousness.
Got it. The tests aren't authorized to evaluate contagiousness. The brilliance of the narrative is really off the charts on this one, as we're continuously told we need to be nasally raped repeatedly in order to control the spread of this uncontrollable disease, which is called contagiousness, while doing so using a test not authorized to evaluate contagiousness. According to Rochelle Walensky, who is very qualified for her job, by the way, because she is not a man and may or may not be white. I can't tell. Even CNN now says the CDC is a punchline, which is kind of like an obese person calling you fat. Check it out.
Recognizing the CDC has turned into a punchline. It is so sad, but it's true. The CDC has turned into a punchline.
And in Let's Keep the Truth from the Public news, the FDA asked a court for 75 years to keep Pfizer's safety data concealed from the public before they have to reveal it. Nothing fishy about that. That's like if your wife asks you, "Are you cheating on me?" And you say, "I'll answer that question in 75 years. There is nothing suspicious about that. But for some reason, the public thinks the FDA and their pharmaceutical cohorts are trying to hide something when they see them trying to hide something. Very paranoid. Nonetheless, a judge has not granted them 75 years. The FDA has been ordered to reveal it all in 8 months. Still too long. But let's get those sales up while we can before something is exposed that they'd rather keep hidden for 3/4 of a century. And a major factor that's causing the narrative to decompose has been the truth that's been exposed on the Joe Rogan podcast recently. With 2 of the most credible doctors you can find, that we didn't want you to find, Dr. Peter McCullough and Dr. Robert Malone, single-handedly causing a shift in consciousness about the narrative. Dude, are the Clintons gonna take care of these guys or not? With freedom of speech, open debate always leads to the best, most truthful ideas winning out. The only purpose of censorship is to hide the truth, so a worse idea built on lies can win. And because free speech has been replaced with censored speech, Dr. Malone's appearance on Joe Rogan's podcast was so important that Congressman Troy Niels submitted the transcript to the congressional record so that big tech can never restrict people from receiving the information. This just in! The Supreme Court has just blocked Joe Biden's fax mandate. It's all crumbling down. A few months ago, those who try to control the narrative threw Joe Rogan under the bus, smearing him for successfully using alternative treatments instead of him being blindly obedient. Big mistake. What they actually did was wake up a f***ing dragon. Joe Rogan, who is a man of the people, now seems to be more dedicated than ever to exposing their lies with the light of truth. It's kind of like the authoritarians took Liam Neeson's daughter. It spelled the beginning of the end for them. Now, instead of the few who control the narrative controlling the people with the narrative, the people are controlling the narrative based on where they're putting their attention. How so? Recent stats show each episode of Joe Rogan's podcast gets 13 times the viewership of CNN, making it the #1 source of news, well, in the world. For some reason, people would rather hear truth and sincerity than lies and deception. Doesn't make any sense. But what that means is the news source that people are now trusting the most is a first of its kind, never seen before thing called a trusted news source. Why do people now ignore CNN and trust Joe Rogan? Well, according to Dr. Jordan Peterson, it's because he doesn't lie or talk down to his audience or manipulate for his own narrow advantage. Little do they know that Mr. Horse Dewormer himself is trying to manipulate people into doing their own thinking and following their own hearts. What a deranged maniac. Why can't Spotify censor this guy? Nothing good ever comes from free speech. What else is a sign that the narrative is crumbling like a fully compliant soccer player on the field in Europe? Fauci almost accidentally told the truth about his partnership with a certain group of people. Watch.
We had a collaboration with some Chinese scientists.
Would everybody quit saying the quiet part out loud, for God's sakes? In other news, YouTube has deleted a video of Dr. Satoshi Omura speaking about the benefits of a horse deworming drug. They did so because they want to protect the public from his perspectives, as YouTube believes he is not a reliable source of scientific information on the medicine. And in other news, Dr. Satoshi Omura was awarded the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2015 for his scientific work that led to the development of a horse deworming drug. And for completely unexplained reasons, people now fully see what the censors are doing. The narrative was diagnosed with osteoporosis when Facebook admitted in court that their fact checkers' facts are not facts. They are merely opinions. And Twitter, the social platform engineered to keep the narrative alive and kill the truth, is being put on life support. Twitter's stock price is down 50% from a year ago. For something that sucks the value out of society, it's still way overpriced. Should you sell your Twitter shares? To find out, just keep an eye on what Nancy Pelosi does with hers. How are the people feeling about the major politicians around the world that have been pushing the narrative for 2 years at the expense of the people? As you can see, people are still loving this tyrannical French politician as they're continuously showering him with love as they're pelting him with dirt and seaweed. While we're on France, here's 100,000 freedom fighters standing together against the mandates that the narrative propagates. For that matter, here's video footage of freedom fighters gathered all around the world together that we've absolutely tried to keep hidden from you. They're either protesting against the mandates or for more mandates. We're really not sure, but we'll try to have that data for you soon. Right, Rochelle?
Those data will be forthcoming.
Very soon. Thank you, Rochelle. And then there's this guy in Australia.
You may only leave home for 3 reasons.
Same energy as the way Harvey Weinstein would hit on a woman. Too much, too fast, too predatory. Kind of makes you obvious, good sir. Therefore, the more authoritarians like this talk, the more they wake people up. It's kind of like an earthquake of dishonesty making the structure of the narrative crumble. AOC was caught in the act of not believing her own narrative about wearing masks, avoiding traveling, and about Florida being a death trap because it's not locked down. When she was spotted not wearing a mask after traveling and still being alive in Florida somehow. She's confused about why people don't believe her narrative that she also doesn't believe. I guess it's because people would rather date her than believe her. And most powerfully, here's a brave Canadian woman speaking on behalf of, well, all of us, to authoritarian dictator Justin Trudeau.
You've sold us out to globalism.
Okay.
You are not working for Canada. You are working for your globalist partners. I wonder how much they're paying you to betray Canada. What do we do with traitors in Canada, Mr. Trudeau? We used to hang them for treason. And you're doing that very same thing to us now. We know what you're doing.
Oh, also, remember Project Veritas's bombshell report at the beginning of the program? Well, for good reason, Project Veritas founder James O'Keefe has come out and said this.
So we're meeting with various senators here in Washington, D.C. after the Anthony Fauci hearing this morning and the Department of Defense documents that we released showing that he apparently lied in his testimony. Let me just say that I'm not suicidal. I love my life.
Not suicidal? We'll see if the Clintons have a different opinion about that, James. In conclusion, is all this backtracking about the narrative because the narrative is truly crumbling? Or because it's part of a strategy to back off and confuse and then push with more fear and control to gain even more traction in people's minds? Or is the left backing off their outrageously unbelievable narrative to give the impression that they have things under control and that they're sensible because the midterm elections are approaching? You be the judge. The narrative and the lovely people behind it, who were definitely not held nearly enough as children, are driven by the love of power. And about that, Jimi Hendrix once said, "When the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace." Jimmy then died of a drug overdose. But nonetheless, with the narrative apparently falling apart, Are we at a point in time when the power of love is indeed overcoming the love of power? You be the judge. But what we do know is the authoritarians who are in love with power are all old as shit. So they're gonna keep pushing hard and fast because they can't afford to be patient because they're all gonna be dead soon, if we could be so lucky. Good night. Real quick, my freedom-loving friend, I want to let you know the Fauci Public Enemy #1 shirt and all my other freedom merch is available on my website, awakenwithjp.com. Today, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, Magnesium Breakthrough by Bioptimizers. Wilder stole mine. The primary reason why I love Magnesium Breakthrough and take it every day is because it helps me effectively reduce my stress quickly and easily. You might have thought before, oh, I'm stressed and I don't like how this feels, makes me function like crap, but I don't want to go spend 10 years in a cave doing silent meditations with monks who may or may not have ill intentions. Well, what a lot of people don't know, and Wilder is telepathically telling me to tell you, is that one key nutrient can effectively reduce stress, and that nutrient is magnesium. But what Wilder also wants you to know is not any old magnesium will do. Your body needs 7 forms of magnesium in order to effectively reduce your stress, and that's exactly what Magnesium Breakthrough delivers to me. Or Wilder, as the case might be. I didn't ask you to think about this. There's 2 reasons why I think it's important to reduce our stress. One's obvious and one's a little elusive. The obvious is when we reduce our stress, it gives us a better quality of life. We feel better in our mind and body. And the second reason why I think it's critical to reduce our stress, even more important than the first reason, is it benefits the people around us that we care about. I know when I've got my stress under control, I'm more emotionally available and happy with the people around me. So it's like I can easily give them more of my best and more of my heart. And Magnesium Breakthrough helps me do just that. That's one of the reasons why it's in my daily routine. To start reducing your stress so you can feel and function your best, just go to magnesiumbreakthrough.com/JP and be sure to use the discount code JP2021 for a healthy discount. He is literally pulling my hair right now. Ow.